Bill Shorten and Christopher Pyne, welcome back to 7:30.
Hi.
Now, we've got Christopher Pyne joining us from Washington, so I think we're going to start there. We talked a little bit about the Trump effect last week, but since then we've had a great deal more turmoil. Just first of all, Christopher, what's the atmosphere like in Washington?
Well, it's chaotic. It's taken on some of the views of a cage fight where Elon Musk is having a public brawl with Peter Navarro, who's the trade representative. And even the Trump White House says they're going to negotiate tariffs, and Peter Navarro will put out a X message saying there'll be no negotiations. So you start to wonder who's actually running the government. Elon Musk is having a conversation you'd normally have behind closed doors in Australia in public because of their obsession with social media, where he's attacking Navarro and Navarro's literally attacking him back. It would be like Jim Chalmers and Katie Gallagher having a public brawl in Australia, which is pretty rare unless there's a leadership challenge on. So it's fascinating, and everyone's holding their breath. And all the normal people that I speak to in DC are at pains to tell me it's not normally like this, and that's true. And one can only hope that it starts to settle down.
Now, this does have ramifications in Australia, not least because of the enormous economic uncertainty that this unleashes on us in the middle of an election. Peter Dutton said that the comments by the Treasurer this week on interest rates coming means that Jim Chalmers, thinks there's a recession coming. He used the recession word. Bill Shorten, how does commentary like that land during an election campaign, do you think?
Well, I think President Trump is casting a big shadow over Australia, over this election. We haven't seen a foreign policy election fought really since the Vietnam War. The real problem for Peter Dutton is that, and for the coalition, I have to say, is that President Trump's creating uncertainty. So we're not talking about cost of living. And with this uncertainty, Australians are seeing their superannuation accounts battered as share markets fall. And in an era of uncertainty, people will go for what they know and not necessarily take a risk on a change. And this is highlighting, I think, the problem of the coalition, not just Mr. Dutton. They seem to be a bit underprepared. They cannot, Bradbury their way, the ice skating fellow, into victory. They've got to have some policies. And Aussies are looking for certainty and stability and shape and form. And at the moment, I think Trump is highlighting a weakness in the coalition approach, who were relying more on grievance.
Now, just before we go on with the campaign here, Christopher, do you agree with that this economic uncertainty favours the incumbent or not?
Well, I do. Economic uncertainty does favour the incumbent, and it's come at a very difficult time for Peter Dutton and his team, of course, because we're now a good 1 week or so into the election. And that makes it very difficult for him. Although Peter Dutton and his team have had a better week this last week, things have reset somewhat, and the debate has reset the position for the coalition. But he still has a good month to prove to people that the coalition has the policies for cost of living. Cost of living has become the biggest issue again in the election, and Donald Trump may well not last in terms of a full month more of campaigning. But right now, I agree with Bill that economic uncertainty does favour incumbents, as we've seen before.
Let's just have a look at what the first leaders' debate gave us last night in terms of the response. So 100 undecided voters afterwards gave the debate slightly to Albanese, 44 to Peter Dutton's 35, but 21% of those people remained undecided at the end of the debate. Now, Bill, does that still qualify as a win? Yes.
In a first-past-the-post system, you'd rather have 44 votes than 35. Listen, if I was to be a bit even-handed, we've probably got lower expectations of Peter at the moment. So the fact that he didn't totally fail was viewed as a step forward. But Anthony, I think, just had more depth. The detail of the policy answers was better. But I have to say, as a veteran of 6 election debates against Mr Morrison and Mr Turnbull, where the crowd each time gave me the numbers, the people who decide this election weren't watching the debate last night. But well done to Anthony. I think his performance was, as the crowd said, just a bit better than Peter Dutton's, and that should reflects something about the electorate at large.
Christopher, notwithstanding the time difference, you may not have been watching all of it, but if you've seen clips, how do you think Peter Dutton went? Last week, both of you were talking about this campaign being lacklustre. How did you think his performance was?
Well, I think he defied expectations, and I feel like a lot of people have made up their mind, if they're voting on cost of living, that they're blaming the Albanese government for their woes. So the debate will not determine who wins the election, and I think all Peter Dutton had to do was perform well enough for the commentators to say it was a draw. Whether Anthony won marginally, according to the people in the room, I mean, I'm always a bit sceptical about the 100 undecided voters. I always think people who self-describe as undecided voters.
It was handpicked by Sky News,
exactly.
Chris.
I mean, having been on Q&A, and having
Sky
been on
News.
Q&A sort of
I think
30
Albo should get a
times
loading.
with a so-called hand-picked audience of undecided voters, I'm not absolutely sure they're undecided. But putting that to one side, I think Peter Dutton did better than people expected, and that's all he needs to do, because the first week was a bit sort of lacklustre, and I think he has reset the agenda.
Now, last night's debate came on the back of an extraordinary beginning to this campaign week, which contained the Liberals backing down on a major policy position of theirs against working from home, wrapped up in their desire to cull the public service. Now, they came out with a series of very big we're sorry on Monday. I'm just going to play a few of those grabs for your delectation.
We got it wrong and we've apologised for it.
We made a mistake. It's always a tough balance to get right between accountability and efficiency of any workforce.
I think we've made a mistake in relation to this policy, Sarah, and I think it's important that we say that and recognise it.
We've listened to feedback from right around the country, not just Canberra-based public servants.
Do you still believe that getting public servants back into the office would have an economic benefit?
Well, I think we dealt with that issue yesterday.
Bill Shorten, how big a backdown is that in an election campaign?
Yeah, that's absolutely the place you don't want to be if you're running an opposition campaign. I thought they were more like proof of life videos, just saying, please still think about us. I mean, I have to go to both this and what Christopher was saying earlier about the debate. For them to admit they stuffed up a core feature of their policies, for Peter not to sort of really blow up in the debate. Elections aren't about primary school and giving every kid a pen award. The truth is, who's more in touch? And I think when we look at who's more in touch, this working from home stuff, it just shows me that, you know, the people behind Peter don't know how people in the outer suburbs are organising their lives. What worries me is it was a sort of a brain snap to have the policy, and from the people who brought you that, are they ready to govern? It goes back to this hypothesis I've had watching this election. The theory that I've got is that I think the Libs sort of thought they'd just get in on grievances against the government, but because of Trump and because an election examines the alternative policies, you've got to have some ideas. So I think it was a red flag, to be honest, those videos saying we got it wrong.
So that's the question, Christopher Pyne. They've tried to wrap it up. In the last grab from Peter Dutton, he's saying we've made our apology, we want to move on. Can they move on, or has the damage, what that policy revealed, does that stick?
Look, I've seen some much worse backflips in my time. The negative gearing backflip from the Labor Party after the 2019 election sort of stands out. No one talks about negative gearing anymore unless the Labor Party's in government with the Greens after this coming election. It certainly doesn't stand alongside there'll never be a carbon tax under any government I lead, which was Julia Gillard back in 2013. So I feel that as backflips go, it was a pretty minor scratch. But what it does actually show is that the coalition's in touch with a lot of business people and small business people who know that some of their employees working from home are working just as hard as they would in the office, but not all of them are. So whether people like the policy or don't like the policy, it does leave the impression behind that the coalition recognises that not every public servant working from home is working as hard as they would be if they were in the office. So as backflips go, it's done, it's over, they've moved on, but I don't think it leaves necessarily a very bad impression on most Australian voters.
But Christopher Pyne, you say it shows they're in touch with business leaders, but don't they need to be in touch with voters in outer suburban parts of Australia, particularly in Victoria and New South Wales. Isn't that the point?
Well, the place that'll be most unpopular, the work from home policy issue, was in Canberra. And the Liberal Party doesn't even win one senator out of 2 in Canberra. So in terms of losing votes, it makes no difference to the coalition succeeding in this election or not. In Canberra, it does send a message to the suburbs that they get that small businesses are the Liberal Party's base, and small businesses know that working from home isn't always the best outcome for their small business. So in fact, I know it seems messy, but the impression left behind is not necessarily anathema to the people that Peter Dutton is trying to attract.
I'm enjoying watching Bill Shorten giggle while you say that. I think he just said, you think?
Christopher, they miss...
I can't
Christopher,
see him. I only wish I could.
Next week.
Christopher, they miss you in the Liberal Party because that was quality retrofitting. It was all a cunning plan, Baldrick. You know?
Now, I'm just going to ask you one more...
You need to be able to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear.
You do. It's a skill.
I'm going to have to end there. This is going to be my problem every week, that I just want to keep going, but they're going to drag me with ropes out of the studio. Christopher Pyne, Bill Shorten, a pleasure. Thank you very much. See you next week.
Cheerio. Travel safely, Chris.
Thank you.